Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod with our UCLA pregame show sponsored by Fanduel Sportsbook, your go-to source for betting on the sports you love to watch. Whether it's a parlay or you just want to stick to the money line, you'll find all the odds you need on the Fanduel app. Easy to download. You can get started right away. Head on over today and get it into whatever app store you use for your phone. Also, head on over to our Fanduel Player of the Game at slido.com, hashtag TIFNOTS, that's TFFINOTS. Obviously, once the game has started or afterwards, and we'll talk about the player of the game after the game, obviously, in our live show. We appreciate all of you subscribe and support the show and content we deliver and bring to you before and each after every game, and all the bonuses like updates with Dom, also the interviews like with Jeff Kohler. We're trying to get a few more of those set up, so stay tuned. And so be sure you're subscribed, and also hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube so that you don't miss a show when we drop one. Well, Rod, MSU's dropped 3 of 4, coming off a disastrous performance in Madison, but they're still sitting in a not so bad position in the Big Ten standings, tied for 5th right now with Wisconsin. And we know that with 6 games ago, I mean, just about anything can happen. Although it definitely looks like Michigan is going to cruise in with the Big Ten championship. Still a lot to play for with NCAA seeding and to a lesser extent the Big Ten seeding, tournament seeding, which matters not much except to my fandom as I'm going to be there in United Center. So when I'm going to be able to watch Michigan State play. And so as far as the Badgers or the Bruins go, kind of a year that we expect a little bit more from them with the huge acquisition of Donovan Dent, which we talk about later. But I think there's a thought that there was going to be a little bit better than they were last year. And it seems like they're the same or maybe not quite as good as they were last season. And sort of the way the season's been progressing.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And it's, some of it's illustrated by what happened to them in Ann Arbor yesterday, losing by 30. But yeah, they're record wise, they're okay. They're 17-8, they're 9-5 in the league.
Right.
They're a tournament team, but there's a difference. Last year, it felt like UCLA was right on the cusp of getting into that contender group that, eventually Michigan State lapped the field. But at this point in the season, we didn't know that yet. When we saw that game in Pauley Pavilion in early February, UCLA felt like a peer team to Michigan State. It didn't end up that way, but they felt that way at certain points in the season. They are not that this year. There's their record's good, but there's a clear distinction between them. And I would even say now, I think there's a difference between them and even Wisconsin.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
So I would say you've got 6 teams that are clear cut better than UCLA. And then after that, you put UCLA in a group somewhere with Iowa and Indiana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, looking at the Bruins so far, like you mentioned, they're 17-8, 9-5. They're 41st in overall in KenPom. And as you also mentioned, they got just blasted at Chrysler by 30 on Saturday. And Mick Cronin, of course, is Mick Cronin. He's. I don't know if he's complaining about the traveling a little bit this year. I guess he did that one time.
He's had other issues on his mind.
He has got to be upset that Mara is because they could really use Mara this year.
Did you see the game yesterday?
I will tell you later what I was doing yesterday, but no, I did not see the game, and I heard there's a blow by with the
of both
handshake.
Of both Dusty May and Mara in the handshake, and I hate handshake line analysis. I think it's stupid, but more to the point, more than the handshake watch. It was what he said after the game. He said, "Michigan's got the most talented team in the country. That's all I've got to say about them." That was it. That was the sum total of what he said about Michigan. Look, I had someone yesterday, I hate to make this about Michigan, but what the hell? I had someone yesterday who, Michigan State person who was traveled to Madison, was at the game, at shoot around, et cetera. And this person knows some people. And he said he was told by somebody who would know, so that's a staff member, who said 17 out of 18 Big Ten coaches hate Dusty May. You can guess who the 18th is that doesn't.
Yeah, right.
That would be himself. But Yeah, it's clear. And in this case, there is, and this is the thing that I think I want to get this out there, because in the wake of Michigan State's loss to Wisconsin, you've now got the same people who were crying and moaning last spring about Michigan State in the portal, finally having their opportunity, I guess.
Right. Now they're vindicated, right?
To rear their heads. Yeah, which is a joke. It had nothing to, the biggest problems by far in that game were defense and defensive rebounding. What was a $2 million two guard going to do to solve either of those? But be that as it may, something that doesn't get talked about a lot in regard to the portal stuff, and it should be understood as true, because it is. When you're talking about, particularly when you're talking about a large percentage of the high end guys, so the guys that people are clamoring for, because remember, Izzo signed 3 guys in the portal. It's not that he didn't sign guys in the portal, it's that they weren't high profile enough, they weren't good enough. That's the
right,
argument.
yeah.
They didn't spend enough. The vast majority might be slightly strong, but let's say a large percentage of the high end guys know where they're going before they enter the portal. Now, how do they know that? You know, we talk about, oh, it's like speed dating, not recruiting, right? It's not even that. There's tampering that goes on. Okay. I was told by that same person yesterday, he says he's heard that Michigan was reaching out to Axel Lendeborg in February last year. That's a long time before he entered the portal, isn't it?
Sure.
There is strong word that they did the same with Morris Johnson at Illinois and Ademara at UCLA, which is part of the reason why Mick Cronin is very unhappy. He feels that his play. In fact, I have heard that Mara had told UCLA he was coming back like 2 or 3 days before he announced he was entering the portal and going to Michigan. But they had been tampering with him too. They tried, reportedly, to tamper with Braden Smith, essentially told him blank check, and he turned him down. I have heard, this rumor is not as well sourced as some of those others, but I have heard that there were overtures made to Jeremy Fears, which is just crazy. I mean, not that it, in a different world with different personalities involved in any of that it could work, but do you have any idea what you're doing when you if you tried to do something like that, what the response would be? I think Tom Izzo might drive to Ann Arbor and shoot him. I mean, and he'd be justified. I mean, it's just, this guy is, and you know what? For a lot of people, winning trumps all. That's fine. I get it. I heard the same shit when I was growing up and even into early adulthood, and Michigan was running a renegade program at that time and buying people and breaking rules and all of that. There aren't many rules left. And frankly, I don't even think there is an anti-tampering rule that could be enforced. We're talking about morality here.
You're talking about, 2 people talking through third parties, and there's no way you'd be able to prove anything.
And there's, again, I don't even think there is a rule. There's not a rule against it. There's no rule to enforce. We're talking about morality, though. Everybody understands the morality.
Sure.
Okay. And so if you're talking about Mick Cronin and his reaction to Mara, well, it's informed by that. He had one of his players taken from him by, granted, they obviously Michigan paid a lot of money. So there's nothing wrong in any sense, in a legal sense, for Mara taking it. And frankly, you don't even necessarily blame Mara on the tampering stuff, assuming that's true. It would take a pretty strong individual like Braden Smith to say, you know what? No.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this. I owe the people I'm with. I want to see that out, whatever it is. but it's primarily on the guilt, the blame goes to the offender, to the one that's actually doing that. And, again, there's not a rule against it. So let's be clear. I'm not alleging a rule violation. I'm saying he's a fucking scumbag. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying he's someone without morals, without character. That's what I'm saying. And I think if the sense I have is if you poll the rest of the Big Ten coaches, 17 out of 18 are going to agree with that.
Right.
So that's where it's at. And
Yeah.
that's fine. I mean, if you're a Michigan fan, you just care about winning a championship. Better hope he wins a championship. Because if he doesn't, all these shenanigans aren't worth very much, are they? That's the thing. You kind of get into a win or else sort of scenario when you play it that way. But, I think a lot of them, because they don't understand or care about basketball, there's not really any kind of reaction to this. I know personally, I would have a very hard time. Very hard. Supporting someone running the program I care about who does this stuff. And I think you see a lot of these other coaches obviously feeling the same way. I'm going to be very clear about it. I like Mick Cronin. I know a lot of people, even Michigan State fans, for some reason, despite the clear admiration he makes boldly stated about how he feels about Tom Izzo. I've seen some Michigan State fans that, mock him or, go after him for the stuff he says. I think he's fantastic because if you think Tom Izzo's blunt, this guy has zero filter. Zero. He tells you exactly what he's thinking at all times. And, I find myself agree. You remember last year when he went on his rant about how soft his team was when they had a loss to Michigan where they had a big lead. No, they were down big. They came all the way back, and then they surrendered it again.
Yeah.
And it kind of like yesterday, but not as bad. And he just tore into his team. And then they lost a couple more games because they had an insane travel schedule, as you were alluding to. But I thought that people went after him. That was great. He knows his team. If he thought that those guys, and they responded to it eventually, they got better. They got tougher. The team we saw at Pauley Pavilion was not that team that took those losses. That was a tough team, competitive, resilient, all of that. He knew his guys. So I'm a big Mick Cronin fan. So when he clearly feels the way he does about a situation, I take it to the bank that there's a good reason for it.
So the counter course, is that you're not playing a popularity contest as a coach. What does it matter if 364 out of 365 Division I coaches think you're terrible?
True.
Does it make it?
Level true.
Does it make a difference with like players if? And I guess the question I have with these. I know it sounds like at least my friend who's an Illinois fan. He said the Morris Johnson thing, it was like a 3 or 4 back and forths to try and figure out a we'll call it a salary for what it's worth.
On the Illinois side, you mean?
Yeah. And then, they kept countering and then, Michigan just outbid them. I don't know what happened with Mara, if it's the same sort of thing, if this sort of thing is happening more, I guess I don't know how this stuff works. I mean, again, it is tampering in the sense that you're contacting people when they not have announced that they've left the team or that they're willing to leave the team.
Right.
But it's all done through third parties. And so it's easy for, everyone to have their hands clean, right? The player, the coach, obviously there's communication, but there's no way to prove anything.
Well, again, we're not talking about rules.
Right. But what does it matter that other people don't like you as a coach? Does it make any difference whatsoever? Is there like any sort of advantage or disadvantage to having
competitively?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. You can be, look, we've all seen it. I mean, it didn't extend to the coach, but everybody in the NBA hated the bad boys, right?
Right.
Didn't matter.
Yep.
No, it doesn't. I don't think it provides any kind of handicap to you competitively. If you're okay with it, fine. It's not gonna hurt you in that sense. I'm talking about how I would feel about a program that I supported, which is something different. And the only reason that it's relevant to talk about 17 out of 18 thinking you're a fucking asshole is it buttresses. It's not just Michigan State people.
Right. It's not just a
this
rival
isn't just
thing.
a rivalry and we're upset because that's the thing. I've actually seen not a lot, but a handful of Michigan State people. How dumb is this? Said, yeah, Tom Izzo's reaction to the blow-by handshake is because he was pissed that he lost. Are you out of your mind? He just got beat by 21 points in Madison. Did you see that with Greg Gard? No, you did not.
Right.
Wake up, dummies. It's obvious why. But that's the thing. When it's not just him, when it's everybody, there you go. It's a fact. He is viewed as a pariah by his own profession.
Pretty impressive to do that in just a year and a half.
And if he doesn't care, and apparently he does not because he's doing it. Okay. That's a choice, Yeah. And if you're asking me, is there any tangible impact competitively? I will say this. You could maybe argue it at the margins that, there are relationships with coaches that do benefit each other in certain ways. So for example, if Izzo's playing somebody from a league, he hadn't seen this team and he's got a buddy who coaches in that league, he'll call him up, he'll get a take. Those things are probably off the table when you're disliked to this degree, but it's such a rare thing. You don't see this kind of unanimity, like there were always during Bob Knight's heyday, there were always coaches he didn't like and that didn't like him, but he always had guys who were in his corner too. I've never seen this. I've never seen a guy that seems to have this kind of, 17 out of 18 might be, maybe that's an overstatement, but not much. I certainly know this. The guys that have been around the block, the guys that are longer term guys don't seem to have any time for this jackass. They don't. And,
all right, let's talk about
telling.
We'll talk about UCLA. And on offense, the Bruins are 47th and KenPom. They have a couple strengths. They're a really good 3-point shooting team. They're 18th in the country at 38%. They don't turn the ball over much. They're 27th in turnover percentage, and they shoot free throws pretty well. They're 50th, shooting 76.3%. Of course, the problem with that is that they don't shoot threes very often. They're 288th in 3-point attempts to overall field goal attempts, which I think is definitely lower than Michigan State's even.
Way lower. About 50
I think State's like 200 or something.
About 50 spots. MSU's in the 230s.
230s. They're 169th in offensive foul rate. So despite shooting really well, they don't get there very often. And they're 196 in 2-point shooting. They're 147th offensive rebounding. So really poor offensive rebounding team. Surprising, for a team that was pretty good last year. I feel like offensive rebounding.
It's different personnel.
Well, right. I mean, Bilodeau's still there, but they've got some definitely.
But around him, it's some different personnel. They had Mara, who wasn't playing at the level he's playing for Michigan this year, but he was occasionally very effective. And they had some other guys as well. They just they had, even on the wings, they had Kobe Johnson, who was a tough kid, could go get some boards. So it's a very different profile. UCLA is in some ways a polar opposite of what we've talked about the last couple games with Illinois and Wisconsin, where I look at them and I say, guys, maybe shoot fewer threes. This team, you'll got to say, guys, you might want to think about trying to generate more. It's one thing you do very well. And the free throw shooting, great free throw shooting team, but they don't get there very much. Why? It's hard to know because it's not like Wisconsin where you could say, okay, the foul rate isn't, or Illinois, you'd say the foul rate isn't great because you're shooting a lot of jumpers. UCLA is not. But I think a lot of it, the weaknesses and the strengths, and the fact that the strengths aren't amplified as much as you'd like, maybe a lot of it comes down to personnel. They just don't have anything on the interior. Because even Bilodeau's a great player. And you look at him and you think that's a guy who should be able not just to hit threes, which he can do, but to bang and be effective around the rim.
Right.
And he is occasionally, but he's not a guy that ever, lives in the post. He doesn't get to the line a huge amount. He looks like a guy who maybe could do that, but he doesn't play that way.
Yeah.
And he's the best they've got in that regard. So it's a hard, it's one of those situations where they tried to address it and they spent some real money on Xavier Booker. And then they got another kid they didn't spend as much on. And it just hasn't answered the question, So that's what it really comes down to. Offensively, this is a team that has some strengths, but they don't really maximize them. And the reason they don't maximize them is the same reason for the weaknesses, in my opinion. They just don't have enough on the inside.
And so on defense, UCLA is 48th, which is about matches their offensive rating. They're definitely worse than last year. They were 14th defensively last year, so that's been a huge change. They're 253rd against the twos, which pretty much explains why they've dropped a ton on defense. And they really a bad defensive rebounding, 237th. It's kind of hard to believe you're a Big Ten team with a defensive rebounding rate stat that bad. They do force a couple turnovers, are 84th in turnover forcing, and they do guard the threes well. They're 26 against the threes. So, not a great defensive. It explains why they've struggled at times during the season.
What's interesting to me is that, they would actually, 48 is not great. It's okay. It's not a disaster, but it's not great for a Big Ten team. But they would be way worse if it wasn't for the threes, because it's not only that they're good against them, teams take a lot of them for some reason. And I think, they're trying to do what they can to play off of people and, to hide their interior weakness. But again, this is something you look at the profile and you say, well, the obvious conclusion is you got to find a way to get to the rim more often against this team. They have no real rim protection, and they can't do much. This is an area where, like, Bilodeau is a decently sized kid, but he's not a great individual defender. So even their biggest guy, their most obvious post player from a physical standpoint, isn't really providing much. They were a really good defensive team last year, really good. And Mick Cronin, more often than not, has those kind of teams. This has got to be killing him.
Yeah.
To have a team that can't guard. And, but that's where he's at. That's the hand he's been dealt, or has dealt himself this year. And I mean, he's basically said that he's pointed the finger at himself and described it. This was a few weeks ago, but described it as, the free agents we went out and signed just haven't done the job. I'm paraphrasing, but he used the term free agents.
Right.
So he's being honest about it. I mean, he's got to play the game like everybody else. They spent real money. UCLA was not shy about spending money in the portal this year. I mean, Donovan Dent, Jesus, rumors were, I think, $4 million. I've heard they spent like $1.5 million on Book. So they spent money. It's just, it hasn't worked. And that's the thing for all the guys who think that it's as simple as going out and spending money in the portal. UCLA is a really good example of the pitfalls of it. And I don't blame Mick Cronin. He had to do it, I guess. But particularly on the interior, he had to do it because he had a guy taken from him. But it's not obvious. It's not easy. It's not automatic. None of those things.
All right. And so finally, when it comes to tempo, this very slow team, they're 236 in tempo, at the average length of offensive possession, and they're 311th at overall tempo. So they definitely slow you down defense. I mean, it's interesting with that defensive number. You kind of wonder if that they sort of force some bad threes, and that's why they give up a lot of attempts because they manage maybe to prevent the ball from getting the interior. I don't, that's.
I think. Well, again, I think what they try to do is what we saw Wisconsin do, what we've seen a lot of teams do against Michigan State, which is they're going to give you room on the perimeter. They're going to try to pack it inside, make it tougher on you to get good looks from two, and encourage you, try to bait you into taking threes. There's some truth to that. But again, overall, it's only worked to a certain extent. I mean,
right.
You're still giving up an ungodly amount of success when teams do take twos. And when you're giving up second chances at the rate they are, it's tough.
Yeah. Kind of impressive they've got 9 wins in the Big Ten, to be honest, with those sort of stats.
But here's the thing. When you and again, I have no axe to grind with UCLA. I actually kind of like them, but you look at that schedule, you look at what they've done, and I'm going to go back over this real quick.
Double play with Oregon, double play with Washington, double play with USC.
that helps you, but I'm looking at the wins. Their best win, hold on. Their best win overall or in the league, I believe. Let me verify this. Well, I'm sorry. They did get Purdue. I forgot about that one. They got Purdue at Pauley.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, their best wins are the 2 they've gotten over Washington.
Yeah.
So basically, take out the Purdue game, which counts. That's probably the one that guarantees them a tournament bid, no matter what they do, relatively speaking, from here.
Sure.
And their remaining schedule is okay.
I think
it's tough.
It's one more game. Yeah.
Well, they got Michigan State, Illinois, and Nebraska, but they also have USC twice, and they've got Minnesota away. It's not easy, but I figure they're going to get at least 2 more wins out of that. They'll be 11-9, worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But their profile, they basically take the Purdue game away. They've won the games they ought to win. They've lost the games they should lose.
Yeah, there you go.
That's really their profile, I think, in fairness.
All right, so it brings us to the Fanduel interesting wager. When, of course, as usual, we are recording before the game, before there's any line on the game on Tuesday. I think between the Bartorvik and Ken Palm, it's somewhere between around 8 to 8.5 points, probably. That is for Michigan State. That seems like a pretty reasonable line to me. I mean, they just got destroyed by Michigan by 30. I don't know that Michigan State's could be by that much, but I guess who knows, right?
I wouldn't.
I don't know if recent trends kind of tend to make you think one way or the other. Certainly not encouraging for either team, I guess, coming into this game. Both their games, They lost by almost 30 points.
Both are coming off big losses on the road. But Michigan State's at home, and this is tough for UCLA.
Yeah.
Right? They've had to come east, and they're on this swing. So they just got whipped. They got to sit around for 3 days and then play at Breslin against a team that you would certainly hope is going to have some fire.
Yeah.
Responding. I think I would take Michigan State to cover.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be 30, but I'm going to be surprised if it's not, 10, 12, something like that. And I don't know how it'll go. It could be that, we see the second half kick that gets it there, or whether they get in, or I'd prefer, and we'll talk about it later, to see a good working margin and then kind of hold it. But one way or the other, I think they'll get there.
Yeah. Well, there's 6 games to go. The 3 of them at home, 3 on the road. The 3 road games are all very challenging road games for Michigan State. So you have to get these games at home. And I wonder too with, I don't know if this is going to be a high scoring game. Like I don't know what the over unders can be. It's usually around about 145 every single Michigan State game. I don't know. Do you think this is a game where UCLA is going to start giving up some points? Or do you think this is one of those games where, UCLA might give up points, but Michigan State's not going to allow a whole lot?
Under. I'd go under. If the line is there, I mean, I need to see the number, but if maybe the better way to put it is, do you think it's going to be a game that's played with both teams in the 70s or 80s? I don't.
Right. Yeah. Well, the brothers Just You Gutters, I would take the over on them. They're going to deliver whatever you need. You can get hold of Kurt or Greg, whether in the east or the west side of the state. They will take care of you. They will take care of the gutters, the downspouts, whatever it might be, whether it's your home, your business. They will do the job. They're out right now, so you can get a hold of them today. I get that stuff taken care of before the spring rains come. And I to tell you a brief story. So I told you I was not available to watch the game Saturday. I had every intention to watch the game Saturday. I got up early. I was going to go cross country skiing, kind of get this whole the taste out of my mouth from the Wisconsin game. And I decided I made a decision, which is a bad one. I decided to go down a seasonal road, which I'd done 2 weeks before. So I had my snow tires, I got my car, I got about 3/4 of a mile down this road. So this is unplowed, basically. There's a plowed portion and then unplowed to get this starting point for the ski area. And then I thought, this is a bad idea. I'm just gonna. The road kept getting worse. I'm like, I'm just gonna turn around. Now it's 1-2 track, so I got to back up. So I'm like, I'm just gonna go. And so where I stopped was probably the worst part because I was at a part that was not packed. My car got stuck, and I was stuck there for 6 hours.
Oh, geez.
I called. So at first I'm like, well, I can get it out myself. I'm gonna dig it out. So I'm digging out under the car. I'm breaking branches and like limbs from dead trees that are sitting around to try to put in for extra traction under the tires. Now I've got snow tires. I've got all-wheel drive. This should be able to get out of there. And after about an hour, I'm like, I'm just not making progress. So I called my wife. We have, so she drives over. She's got a bad knee. She comes out to try and help me a little bit. We'd work on it for like, I don't know, another 30 minutes or an hour. And like, well, this is just not going to happen. I've got to call a tow truck, but I don't know how they're going to be able to get down this seasonal road. Well, there's only one towing service up here in Northern Michigan that can do that. Their truck's not working. So my car is going to be stuck there. I'm like, I'm gonna have to wait till this snow melts. I don't know anyone with around this area who can pull me out. Fortunately, my neighbor, and his buddy came out. They helped dig it out a little bit. And then as I went to my parents' house, I got a come along, which is something sort of like a winch you can get. So I had to wrap my trailer hitch around and attached to a tree and then try to pull it back that way. But you have to put your car neutral. Well, at this point, my battery was dead. So, which I knew was bad. So I had to go run and get a new battery. And so anyway, long story short, we ended up getting the car out, but it took 6 hours. I can barely move today. I'm so sore. Like my fingers are sore. My knees are sore. My arms, my back. It was a bad decision. And one of my neighbors who came out and helped us out of the snow. He said, boy, I bet your wife's going to give you a hard time about this for a while. I said, I think forever. I don't think this is I think I'm going to hear this story for the rest of my life. We'll be in the rest home. She'll be talking about me being dumb, driving down this road and getting my car stuck in the snow. So needless to say, I did not see anything on Saturday afternoon. We didn't get out of there. Fortunately, I started at 9, so we're done at 3, but it was it was an adventure. So make sure you don't have an adventure. You don't want one where you're falling off a ladder. Call the brothers Just You Gutters. They can take care of you. 10% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate, which you can do at our support page at tffinots.com/support. All right, so let's go through the opposing lineup for the Bruins. Then Rod will tell us who the player is that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter. We'll begin with Donovan Dent, the ultra high priced guy who Michigan State faced in the NCAA tournament. He was at New Mexico with his second round game. He gave him a lot of trouble in that game. And he was probably one of the highest. I mean, he was probably on par with Yaxel Lenenborg for high profile transfers for coming into the season, I think.
Oh yeah, because you're talking about a point guard, and the two positions that are always going to attract the most attention and generate the most money are point guard and center, because they're the two most important positions in the modern game. So yes, he was near. The only thing that prevented it from being a bigger story is there was no real mystery about him going to the NBA, as far as I can recall. I don't remember that being discussed. And it happened fairly quickly and was kind of understood that's what's going to happen.
Well, he's from
Riverside.
Yeah. So he's from there.
And he reported, this is one where, again, I don't I don't get as exercised about this one because the story, as I recall it, is that Donovan Dent grew up a UCLA fan. He wanted to play for UCLA. He just wasn't seen as good enough when he was being recruited. So this was an opportunity for him to see that through. So I'm not as bothered by this kind of in my gut as I am some of these other deals.
Right. So anyway, he transfers. He's a 6'2" senior, scoring 13.5 points on a game right now, averaging 7 assists to 2 turnovers a game. But what's surprising is that his shooting has been just dreadful. 41, 19, 63. This is a guy who was he was shooting 40% last year at New Mexico. And I mean, there's definitely a difference going from one conference to the next as far as can you shoot at that same level? But we're not talking about moving from the Ivy League or like the SWAC.
He played in a very competitive league.
Mountain West, they're good teams.
Played in a league that had 5 NCAA tournament teams last year. Yeah.
Maybe you'd expect a little bit worse, but not like 19. That's like crazy.
Well, here's the slip. 8% less overall from the floor. Right. 22% worse from 3, 15% worse at the line. It is an across the board dive.
I guess, the question is, what do you attribute it to? I mean, this guy was a Mountain West Player of the Year last year.
I don't know.
Is it just playing for UCLA or just a new environment? Or
maybe some pressure.
Yeah.
Is part of it. May just having a bad year. Not, I don't know what his off season was like. I mean, I really can. And then sometimes, you know what? People don't like to hear this because as human beings, especially Americans, it's part of American culture that we don't accept that there's nothing you can do sometimes to address bad results. We always want to believe there's a fix. There's a solution. Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes stuff just happens.
Yeah.
And maybe that's it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Donovan Dent, it's not the only reason, probably not even it might not be the most significant thing. I think their interior problems have been the biggest deal, but it's been a huge negative. There's no getting around that. They thought they were bringing in a guy who was as good as any point guard in the country. I mean, they really believed this is a guy that can stand toe-to-toe with Braden Smith. And he hasn't been close. You're talking about a guy that was a preseason All-American that probably is not going to be all Big Ten. That's big.
Yeah. Well, and then moving on to Trent Perry, the off guard, he's a 6'4" sophomore, averaging 12.7 points a game. Now he's shooting really well. He's 46, 45, and 85, 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, which, he doesn't have a lot of assists per game, like 3 a game, but he's definitely taken a big step from his freshman year.
Yeah. He was a guy that was I believe he was a McDonald's All-American, and a lot was expected of him. And he really he played, he was in their rotation, but they were a little deeper team last year, and he struggled to make a consistent impact. You could see flashes, but nothing like what he's done this year. Basically, what he's done is what you expect of guys in a program that develops people, and Mick Cronin's been a guy that over his career, he's done that. He's helped guys get better. And that's exactly what's happened with Trent Perry. He's stepped up. With some injury issues they've had, he's become a starter, and I don't think he's going to relinquish that role anytime soon because he's played very, very well.
Right.
Offense.
Right. Well, then Eric Daly is a 6'8", 230-pound junior, averaging 11 points a game, 5.6 rebounds a game, which ties for the team lead in rebounding. He's shooting 47, 26, and 74. So his, 3 production is not great, but he's still in the starting lineup here for a team that generally shoots pretty well.
Daly's a good overall player. I would say he transferred in last year from Oklahoma State.
Right.
And they really thought they were getting, I hate to make the comparison, but I think they thought they were getting a guy who could be a version, certainly a lesser one probably, but a version of something like what Michigan's gotten from Lendenborg.
Yeah.
A guy who at his size, at 6'8", could play the 3, can play the 4, and is just capable of doing some of everything, impacting every area of the game. And Daly has done that to an extent. I think they've been disappointed in the jump shooting. I think they thought they were going to get a little better production there. And he maybe isn't quite the scorer, hasn't been yet. And this isn't even just this year. This is last year as well. He's been good, and he is a good player. I think they thought they were getting something maybe a touch more than that, and it hasn't quite happened. But I don't rule it out for next year, assuming he's still there.
Right.
There's potential.
And then we come to, I guess you say easily, UCLA's best player, Tyler Bilodeau, 6'9", 240-pound senior. He came in from Oregon State originally. He's averaging almost 18 points a game, 5.6 rebounds a game, shooting 51, 45, and 85. And he's a guy, your point is, I feel like he's got enough ball skills, too, to drive, and he doesn't do that as much. And I feel like he's pretty successful oftentimes when he does. So you think he'd do that more, get some contact.
He is one of the tougher covers at that position, not just in the league, but in the country, I would submit. I really do think that. I think his ability to shoot, as you say, he's got some handle, and with his body, he can bang. He can finish inside. He's not an explosive athlete, but he can do damage pretty much anywhere on the floor. You know, we talk about 3-level scorers. He's that. But if there's a criticism, and it's mild because this is a pretty good player, but it's that he doesn't use his ability to be physical as much as maybe he could. That would be my criticism, but it's a mild criticism because it's hard to ding a guy who's doing what he does very much.
And finally, at the 5, Xavier Booker, someone obviously very familiar to Michigan State fans, 6'11" junior. He's averaging a little over 7 points a game, almost 4 rebounds a game, plays about 20 minutes. He's shooting 55, 42, and 67. Definitely not as 3 happy as he was at Michigan State. There was a portion of the season where he was barely playing, and so he's worked himself back into playing a lot more minutes than he was playing. I feel like December, he was like hardly on the floor. I know he's kind of injured at one part a little bit maybe, but it seemed like there's something else going on.
Well, I give him and I give Mick Cronin credit for this much. Only about 30% of his attempts have come from 3. And I want to do a quick, bear with me here because I didn't look at this and I should have in advance to see what it was for him last season at Michigan State. I suspect.
Had been over 50% of his shots were threes.
Well over that.
Yeah.
So let us see. Yeah, so he took, let's see. Come on. He took, it was well over 50%. He took 66 shots from 2 last year. He took 73 shots from 3. So
55% or something. Yeah.
I have to believe that part of Book shot 23% on 3s last year. He's at 42% now. I have to attribute some of that to shot selection. And so that's a good thing. They've made him a more efficient player by reining that in. So that's good. He's had moments. He's had some individual games where he did some good things. But honestly, what you've seen, if you've paid any attention to UCLA this year, would look very familiar overall to Michigan State fans. He's tried. I think he's continued to add maybe a little bit of weight, still not big enough to really bang inside. He's obviously tried to play differently on offense. And I think he tries defensively, but I just, and this is not a knock on Xavier Booker. This is just descriptive. That's how I mean it. Because everybody I've ever talked to says that he's a really good kid. I have no reason to disbelieve that. And I think the very fact that he chose to go to UCLA, where he knew he would be coached hard, I've said this before, I think that's a statement about him positively and those around him, that he didn't look for an easy way out, a program where they'd say, hey, shoot 23s a game. We're fine with that. He didn't do that. But the conclusion I have to reach is I don't think Xavier Booker loves basketball.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That doesn't make him a bad person. You can, if you want, you can question the wisdom of that to say, look, you're 6'11, you've got athletic ability, you obviously have some talent. That's a path, for life success, blah, blah, blah. You really ought to give it everything you've got. I get that, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's a conclusion I have to reach, though, because you look at him and then you compare him, say, to two guys that he's going to be going up against, Jackson Kohler and Carson Cooper. And to me, there is little doubt, as in none. Those guys love the game, love the process, all of that.
Yep.
Much more than Xavier Booker does, because Xavier Booker had more tools. He came to Michigan State with much more in the way of natural gifts than those guys had. And yet, if you're a Michigan State fan, I think you'd be insane if you'd trade either one of them for Book right now. I don't think anybody would. That's because they love it enough to have put in the work and wanted to be better. I don't know that Book loves it enough to do that. And so you've got what you've got, which is a guy that can do some things. It's not that he's a totally useless player, but if that's your starting five, man, you're going to have the problems that UCLA has had at both ends on the interior. That's just how it is.
Right. Yeah, his story reminds me a little bit of one of my partners. His son was really, really good at lacrosse, and would I would get asked to do extra travel and stuff when he's in high school, and had multiple Division I offers to play lacrosse in college. And he turned his dad one day and he's like, "Dad, I just don't want to play lacrosse in college. I'm sort of done." His dad's like, "All right, no problem." Yep. Because he recognized that was just not his. Now that's different because he's not a guy who's 6'10" or something like that. But still, there are certain aspects where it's just like you kind of move on from life, or you recognize what,
right,
what's important to you. Again, nothing right or wrong about it. Now, other parents were upset because, of course, that meant there are less scouts who might see their kid play. But that's totally different, right? This is
and look, ultimately it comes down to what's going to make you happy. And my understanding is Xavier Booker's a good student. He's always come across as a bright kid. I would imagine that he's going to have every opportunity to have a successful life. Last year we used to, I think we said it more than once, like you talk to Jace Richardson or you watch him be interviewed by other people and you'd say, it doesn't matter what happens with his NBA career. That's a guy who's going to be successful in life.
Yeah, no right. He's going to flourish. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that can be true for Xavier Booker too. He does not strike me as a kid where it's like, yeah, it's basketball or bust, man.
Exactly.
If he doesn't make it, his options are limited.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. There's no reason to believe that. And if it's not going to make you happy, if you don't love it, then you're probably going to put yourself in a worse position psychologically if you continue to do it. Now, you could say, look, who likes working? Right. And I get that. I get that thought process that, hey, your gifts give you an opportunity to do some things financially to give yourself security, a future family security, all of that. Okay. That's not nothing. And I accept that there's some validity there, but at the same time, you gotta do, to a certain extent, you gotta do what makes you happy if you have options. Right. And I just don't, I have no way of knowing this, and I certainly wouldn't put money on it, but would you find it completely shocking if there was an announcement in April that Xavier Booker just said, you know what, I don't need to play basketball another year?
No. Well, we saw the Delvin Rowe. that was different because of injuries sort of led him to
that was driven by, I think,
but still, it was sort of, he saw other things, opportunities in life, and he decided to pursue those instead.
Right. They are different, but I hear you. But it just wouldn't shock me. I'm not saying I'd bet on that. I have not heard anything. I just, looking at it from the outside, it just wouldn't be shocking to me. And, good for him, whatever he wants to do, if he's got it figured out. But for UCLA basketball, it's not been the answer to some problems. Put it that way.
All right, so then let's move into the reserves. And one kind of surprising, the former starter, Sky Clark, 6'3" senior. He's had a lot of injuries this year. He's only played 13 games. He's averaging 13.1 points a game on 48, 49, and 90 shooting. So he has really made hay with his outside shot, but it has been a struggle just staying on the floor this year for him. It's too bad.
I think that's been the big problem. He's come back recently. He has not reclaimed his starting role because Trent Perry's been playing very well, and I tend to think that's probably going to remain intact. I think, but I think obviously he's still having a good season when he's been able to play. And I think I was shocked by it because the Sky Clark that had been built up into an all-world player, and in fairness, he had some injury problems in high school that hurt him. But if you remember the story, he started out as a Kentucky commitment, decommitted from Kentucky, but honestly, the word was he was encouraged to do so.
Yeah.
Ended up at Illinois, was terrible there, didn't seem to gel, and bailed out halfway through the season. It was not a good fit. Then he did a year at Louisville, and it was bad. Bad team. That was the Kenny Payne's year where they were just one of the worst teams in D1. So all of that was kind of the backdrop, and I just concluded, well, this is another one of those cautionary tales, right? Mm-hmm. And no, it has not been. He got to UCLA and has thrived. And I think the main reason it's worked is he had always been talked about as a point guard, but he never really seemed comfortable in that role. And last year, even when UCLA, this is the thing about Donovan Dent. Donovan Dent was considered a huge addition, for many reasons, not least of which was that he actually gave them a true point guard, which they didn't really have that answer last year. If you remember, they had a number of guys who kind of masqueraded in that role, but they didn't have anybody that was a perfect fit. Sky Clark, they didn't really even ask to do it that much, and that was to his benefit. I think what's turned his career around at UCLA has been that Mick Cronin has realized this is a guy who could score. He's a scorer and a shooter, and if we take floor leader responsibilities away from him, he's going to be able to thrive in that role. And that's exactly what's happened. So credit to the kid, credit to the coach for sticking with it and finding an answer that's worked. And clearly it has. But for him this year, the only issue has been availability. When he's played, he's been pretty good.
It's kind of a little bit along the lines of the discussion with the backup point guard at Michigan State, where people are like, "Oh, just have so and so do it because they can dribble or something." Well,
it's not that
their effectiveness at the two might be totally now they're in a different role. You're asking too much and might affect them the rest of their game.
You got to find it's important that you want to expand what guys can do. That's always a part of growth, right? We talk about that all the time. Can this guy develop more consistent jumper? Can this guy get better on defense? All of those things. That's all true. But there's also on the other side of it, there's the ability, both player and coach, to realize, okay, at his core, his essence, this guy is this thing and not that thing. And if I try to keep pounding that square peg into that round hole, the peg's going to get damaged.
Yep.
Even if I try to put it back in the square hole, it's not going to be as good as it was.
Right.
And I think in Sky Clark's case, that's been the realization.
Next, we have Jamar Brown, 6'5" senior transfer from Kansas City. He's averaging 5 points a game, 3.4 rebounds a game, plays about 18 minutes, shooting 46, 37, and a perfect 100 from the line. Most of his shots are coming from outside the arc.
Yeah, 2/3 of them. So that's really what he is. But again, this is a team that doesn't take a lot of them. So his impact is maybe a little more muted than you might think because he's got good efficiency numbers. This is the kind of addition you make when you're trying to fill out a rotation. And so he's your 7th, 8th guy in the rotation. And so his production's been fine for that. They weren't I remember there was some summertime hype around him There was a point I remember reading somebody covering that program saying, yeah, he's been their best player in the summer. Well, he's not that, but he's been a decent addition for them. That's what you hope to get out of a guy you're grabbing from Kansas City.
Right. Next, we have one of their backup bigs is Steven Jamerson, 6'10", 230 pounds, so a little bit on the light side. Averaging 2.2 points a game, 2.4 rebounds a game, plays about 12 minutes, shoots 71% from the floor, 61% from line, so he's not a stretch threat, but he's definitely part of those interior reserve force.
Yeah, it's the same issue as with Book. He's not physical. He's not able to add that kind of presence at either end. I mean, the 71% is great. It tells you he knows what a good shot is.
Right.
But he's just not able to bring enough of what they need to make that interior game better. And they basically got two similar, not that they play exactly the same way. Book, obviously, much better shooter from range, all of that. But they kind of, you could critique what Cronin did in terms of adding two roughly similar guys from a physical perspective. You would have been better off maybe if you say, okay, we've got a counter as a reserve, somebody who maybe isn't very skilled, but he can bring the wood inside. He's big, he's physical, he tosses his body around. Might have been a better play.
And so finally, we have Brandon Williams, 6'7", 230-pound sophomore. He was injured last year, didn't play. So this year he's averaging 2.5 points a game, a little under 2 rebounds a game, plays about 13 minutes, shooting 37, 23, and 59.
Yeah, I mean, ninth guy in the rotation. They get him in there, one or two turns a half for limited minutes. And they still think he has potential. He's got a good physical package, decent athlete, 6'7", 230. That's good size to maybe be a 3/4 man. But he just hasn't been tremendously productive so far. First year back from a year-long injury.
All right, so who do you have as a player that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter?
Bilodeau's been their best player, as you said. There's no doubt about that. But I'm going to go with Donovan Dent because I think with, he has had, I don't know whether we mentioned this, his play's been slightly better in Big Ten games. He's shot 42, 24, 64. That's slightly better. Not good, but slightly better. There have been individual games this year where in Big Ten play, particularly where Donovan Dent has played well. And we know that the potential is there on any given night for him to do that, right? So to me, if you've got a capable point guard or a guy with the potential to do damage at that position, that's always where it starts, always. And I think it's hard for me to see a path for UCLA winning if Donovan Dent is at least not very good in this game. And there's a challenge there, and it goes both ways because I don't feel as if, UCLA can slide Perry over and I guess be okay with backup minutes, but both Michigan State and UCLA are weaker because one thing Dent's done is create shots. 7 assists to 2 turnovers is pretty good. It just doesn't compare to what's going on in East Lansing and West Lafayette, but he's done very well as a floor leader, as a creator. That's one area that hasn't suffered. If you take either Fears or Dent off the floor for a long stretch of time, their team's going to suffer for it, right? And so I think that's important too. And that's why I would say he's the guy I would isolate, because Jeremy's the guy who can guard him, and Jeremy's got to stay on the floor to guard him, and vice versa.
All right, so who cleans the glass best? Brought to you by the Swedish Squad of Grand Rapids. Friends, if you need your windows cleaned, whether it's your business, your home, high-rise, maybe your state capital, the Swedish Squad of Grand Rapids can take care of that. They will be on the job, and they'll get on the ladders. They're out there right now, and so you can get a hold of them at any time, and they can take care of those windows. Make sure they're nice and clean for your patrons or your family members. They will also, later on in the year, when this gets a little bit warmer, they'll go out and they'll power wash your home and get all the grime from the winter off. So make sure you get that scheduled today as well. You get 15% off simply by mentioning Final Four when you go to our support page and get your estimate from Troy and his team. And again, it is a very large region that they work at. They've obviously gone to Lansing. So I give them a call first. But if you think about you want to get your windows cleaned, which is always very important, especially for business owner, Make sure those windows are nice and sparkly so your customers don't think you're like a rundown hovel. Head on over today, and they, of course, they sponsor Who Cleans the Glass Best right now. Rod's on a heater. He's up 12-10 with 6 to go. I'm getting close to danger zone here. And you get to pick first because I had Kohler last game. It did not work out for me, which it never seems to have the last 6 times I've had him or something.
Jackson Kohler.
Yep, you're taking Kohler. Well, I'm going to have to go with the Cooper Carr combo and hope for the best here. And I'll leave you for your partner for
this is where
here.
it gets tricky because
I mean, last game was what Tang was the best, I think.
Yeah, Cam Ward is the obvious choice, but he hasn't been consistent lately. He's had some great rebounding games. He hadn't had any where he was not many where he was a total no-show. I think he had 3 last game.
Yeah,
for you, but you don't know what you're going to get, and there's always the possibility that somebody like Tang, somebody like Jordan Scott steps up and posts numbers. But I am going to go with Cam Ward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is possible that they'll have more, but that's even more of a risk-reward sort of situation as well.
Yes.
Like right now you're in the driver's seat, so you just have to just stay steady and just
I got to have Jax put up 13 in this game.
Yeah, well,
give me some cushion.
Yeah, you go up 3 with 5 to go. I'm going to be in serious trouble. I'm going to have a date with that basketball.
Get that basketball ready.
Yeah, it's there. It's not far. I look over it and I'm like, oh, there.
Yep, that's right.
That becomes one hot episode because that thing, you don't realize it's hot until you put it on your head and leave it there for a while. I don't know how people put them on for the entire game. Like they had those. I think you're kind of crazy to do that. But anyway, one guy who is always hot is Jackson Kohler. He's got that great line of apparel now at Nudge Printing, as you can see on the screen right now. Head over to Nudge Printing and you can get your hands on that. Jeff Kohler was on a show last week talking about that, and that is you can get hoodies, t-shirts, all sorts of different apparel, white and green, different colors. You can get that at the Nudge Printing, and of course they sponsor the 5 keys of the game. They also have the drawing, so head on over to nudgeprinting.com/win. There you can enter the free drawing for the $120 quarter zip Sparty basketball. It is really sweet. It's the best prize that Gabe's had all season. Head over there today. It costs nothing, and there's no reason not to do it. You can also pick up some more swag if you want. You can also go to any of the rest of the stuff in the Nudge collection. And of course, you get 20% off simply by typing in TFF INOTS at the purchase. Yes, it's TIFNOTS, not the easiest to remember, but so that's why listeners to the show get that extra 20% off, and you'll be happy with it. Of course, everything at Nudge is great stuff. All right, so the first key to the game is attacking the rim. This is something Michigan State did not do, and of course, one of many things Michigan State did not do in Madison, but one that with a team like UCLA that struggles so much against 2, but you figure they've got to do this.
Look, it was a total failure in Madison, and give Wisconsin some credit. I mean, but this is the thing. So I've seen people, Jim Comparoni, I respect a lot at Spartan Mag, and I think generally does a great job in terms of his basketball analysis, which is most of those kind of sites tend to be football heavy. And so the basketball side tends to be weaker by comparison in terms of understanding. Not the case at Spartan Mag. I mean, I know I'm doing a free commercial, but I really do believe that.
You're welcome, Jim.
But I disagreed with something that he said in his analysis of the Wisconsin game. He talked about, Wisconsin sagged, dared Michigan State to shoot, and that made it tough on Jeremy Fears. Well, everybody's been doing that.
Right.
That's not unique to Wisconsin. I felt that watching it, and I said to him actually that if you go back and look, you're going to see multiple possessions where Jeremy Fears got switched onto a big and did nothing to try and take advantage of that. That's not like him. That's not what Michigan State needs. He's better than that. He has to be better than that. So he's got to be in much more of an attack mode, you know. The only guy who really played that way was Coen Carr, played with some force.
Yeah.
And got results with that. But Michigan State has got to be much, much better. UCLA is probably going to do a similar thing. You know, we just talked about it. What's one reason they give up so many 3-point attempts when teams aren't very successful shooting against them? Well, they're trying to do everything they can to help what's a poor interior, and so one of the ways you do that is you sag. You play off shooters, you try and bait them into taking jumpers, and you also try to just put more bodies in the lane so it's tougher to finish. But Michigan State can do, there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat. One of them is you got to finish plays you get at the rim. Michigan State did not do that at Wisconsin. They've done that much better for most of the season. One thing you definitely have to do, you've got to convert offensive rebounds, which Michigan State should have a ton of in this game, into points. They did not do that in Madison. They struggled to finish those plays. And then you need to be in transition, which they did do well against Wisconsin, but it wasn't enough to overcome the weakness in the first two areas. So The bottom line is, in a game like this, you've got to attack. The other thing, which we haven't mentioned, UCLA is number 219 in the country in defensive foul rate. What that means is they foul a lot. They put opponents on the line a good amount. The way you get that to happen is by being aggressive, though. So the mentality's got to be there.
Yeah, I've got to imagine it's going to be a difference that we saw from the Wisconsin.
You would hope.
I'd be surprised. Usually Michigan State was going to respond well to the situation like that, and it was a road game. So, second key to the game is the glass. Michigan State did not rebound well against Wisconsin. They gave up a lot of offensive rebounds to a team that doesn't offensive rebound much. Also, they didn't get many offensive rebounds of their own, and certainly when they did,
they did not to their usual level.
35%.
Wisconsin's a good defensive rebounding team. That part was not as shocking to me. Michigan State's defensive rebounding, the fact that the rebounding battle was essentially even.
Yeah.
In terms of percentage, and Wisconsin did much more with theirs when you talk about points. That floored me. Never saw that coming. UCLA is not a good offensive rebounding team, and they are a terrible defensive rebounding team. Michigan State's got to make hay in this area. They have to have and should have, and there's no excuse for not having, a decisive edge at both ends on the glass. Bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd hope for in this sort of game with those numbers that Michigan State's plus 40% offensive rebounding rate and that UCLA's sub 28 or something like that.
Yeah, mid-20s. That would be a good, right, exactly. That's about where I would get in. 15 or so percent edge.
Yeah, right. So the third key to the game is guarding the arc. Obviously, as you mentioned, UCLA, really good three-point shooting team. They don't take a lot of them, but, last thing you want is for a team like this comes in and they on the road and they just start getting hot from three, especially early. We saw that with Wisconsin. They, hit 4-4 and they just never stopped. You want to make this, I think, difficult for the team to start with. I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah. The deal here, the difference is, as opposed to Wisconsin, it's not in UCLA's offensive DNA to take a lot of threes.
Right.
At the same time, it's very hard to see a path for UCLA winning if they're not efficient in the shots they do take. So if you're Michigan State, you need to do a much better job in locating and closing on shooters, making sure you've got good contests, not giving up a lot of wide open threes than you did in Madison. I think that's the key. You want to make this team have to put the ball on the floor and generate 2-point shots.
So the fourth key to the game is book, and that does not refer to the Fanduel Sportsbook.
And we've talked about this at some length already. I would say for the most part, he's been what Michigan State fans would have expected. They could have told UCLA fans, this is what you're going to get. But we haven't seen this specific scenario play out often. I was trying to recall this, and maybe you can recall another one that I'm missing. But the only time in this portal era that I can recall MSU facing a former MSU player was Foster Lawyer in the NCAA tournament when he played for Davidson. Can you think of another one?
No, I'm trying to think. Like Corey Lucius went to Iowa State, but I don't think they ever played.
They never played Chris Allen or Corey Lucius.
Yeah.
But that was pre-portal.
And then,
they never played Notre Dame when Garrick Sherman was there.
Someone went to St. Louis. I can't remember his name right now, but
Javon Bess. Yep,
yeah,
they didn't play him.
played him. Yeah, I don't know.
They didn't play Texas A&M when Julius Marble was there.
Right.
They didn't play. Who else am I? Well, they obviously haven't yet played NC State. Trey Halibut. So this is a rare kind of occurrence.
It is for now. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so that creates an uncertainty. Like what happens?
Yeah.
You know,
both ends, I think.
And you absolutely. And again, this is not one where there's any hostility. This is not like yesterday with Mara playing UCLA and there's bad feelings there.
Right.
This is not that. Everybody feels pretty good on both sides of this, I think. But I would think for Book having the game at Breslin is a little weird. But I also would expect that, you know, we've talked about maybe some of the motivational stuff with him, but you would have, if there's ever a day or a night that you would expect Book to play with his hair on fire or his version of that, it would be this one, right? He's going to want to show everybody what they're missing. That's clear. If you're a human being, you're going to feel some of that.
For sure. That can
you
go
know,
both ways. He could be too nervous and too hyped up too, right?
There's that possibility as well. Absolutely. And, you know, his former teammates are not going to want him to show them up. So they're going to have motivation too. I think the big thing here is even though he's reined in the attempts, he has shot the three well. And so it's going to be on guys, I would imagine.
Largely Jax.
I would guess Jax is going to cover him to start with because I think they'd want Cooper on Bilodeau, who's a better player and maybe more versatile offensively. But, you know, other guys are going to see him. They've just got to be aware of that and make sure that they're able to contest under control when Book does rise up for a three, because he will take some in this game. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear too that he will get the treatment like any other opposing player from the zone and the fans. Although there won't be any, like you said, there won't be any extra vitriol or sort of.
No,
he'll get, if he has an air ball, he'll get as much taunting as an air ball, like as anyone else. He'll be like any other player.
Nobody's gonna. Yeah, there's no the reaction. The difference between this one and say if Michigan State did have NC State coming into the Breslin.
I don't know what that would be like.
That would have been bad. That would have been bad.
I don't even know how that would have turned out.
It would have been ugly. This would, I'm pretty sure of that. I'm not saying that I support that. I'm just calling it as I see it.
Yeah.
When I look at how Michigan State fans have reacted to that, that would have been rough. This one, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it's very fortunate for Trey Hallman that it didn't happen because I think he still will be in good graces in general with the fan base without that sort of thing happening. Anyway, fifth key to the game and last one is the start. And this is one that, you know, Michigan State has had some clunkers to a number of games. They started pretty well against, I feel like they started okay against Illinois, but the other three games, not good starts, which, you know, or actually 4 games, probably even Rutgers was not a good start either. So
it's been a while.
It's been a while.
It's been happening for a while. It's been happening long enough that it's time for us to talk about it, I think, in these keys, because it's been a regular feature and you can't keep putting yourself down. I mean, if you look at these games, you know, you look at the Michigan game, well, one of the features of that is Michigan State dug itself such a big hole that even when they got out of it, they didn't have enough left in the tank to finish the job.
Right.
You know, Minnesota, it wasn't quite the same thing, but I think they were never able to get their footing in that game. They were never able to feel comfortable. Rutgers, they had to dig out of a big hole. They managed to do it, but that's because they were playing a lesser team. You know, and then Wisconsin, they really only made one semi-push.
Yeah, that's
where they got it to 9, but there was never game pressure on Wisconsin.
Right.
So it would be so much of a benefit, first of all, for everybody's psyches and their mental state of well-being, right? But beyond that, just for the team, being able to play with confidence and to be comfortable, get out to an early lead, establish yourself a working margin. And I'm not talking about, oh, you got them buried by 20. I mean like a 3-possession kind of lead, you know, 12 minutes into the first half, that kind of thing, where you've settled into a game and you're in control of it. You haven't won it yet. So I'm not trying to set the bar too high. You got to win it in the first 10 minutes. No, but just get off to a solid start, hit some shots, get some stops, get a little bit of a margin going for yourself, and then play the game from that vantage point rather than this constant scramble to have to get back into it after you've been terrible early on.
Yeah, no question. All right, before we wrap up here, I want you to go, if you would mind, just checking out Coen Carr's last 4 games, or 5 games, and his 3-point shooting. I'm just a little curious on that. But this is obviously, and I'll just talk for a little bit while you look that up. But I think it's interesting. This is a game. Obviously, it's very important. I mean, Michigan has 2. This is their last as 2 games at home in a row. You have to get this game in if you want to feel good about yourself. I mean, you drop this game, and it's going to be really a struggle going into the NCAA tournament and from a seeding standpoint, because you're still in a good position, I think, as Michigan State, as you mentioned, to get a protected seed. You still have opportunities for that. So you're not having to travel quite so much during the NCAA tournament. And I don't think either of us really care that much what happens in the Big Ten tournament. But it's interesting, because we think that probably not best that they have a deep run playing 3 days in a row with just Jeremy playing 30 plus minutes a game. But I'm curious about Coen Carr, because I feel like it's not going
to be a number. Going back to the Rutgers game, he's 3 for 11.
Okay, so it's not that. He just started out pretty confident that first one against Wisconsin. Okay, so this is maybe.
But I do think this. I think 4 for 15 if you go back to Maryland, and then if you take it to Oregon, 7 for 20.
So even
that's where, if you go back that far,
35%
7 for 20, right? If you go back to the Oregon game, but more recently it hasn't been quite that good. But I do think you've seen him more confident and more effective taking those dribble 2s.
Oh yes, he feels very confident taking that 20-footer or something like that.
That's progress. Because if you do that consistently, that does force a difference in the way the defense has to guard you. Because they're giving part of them giving him as much room as they are is they're also, it's not just, you've got room to take the 3. It's you've got room to take a dribble or 2, get yourself to 15 and rise up. Like they're playing that far off him. So if teams have to respect that, that's going to change how they have to align defensively to try and at least take that away.
Right. Like if you're playing off him so far, and he takes 2 dribbles, the last thing you're expecting, the thing you're much more worried about is him going all the way to the rim. So you're still going to be backing up a little bit to give him still that like you said, that 15-footer,
right?
That jumper. They're not going to be contesting that either, because they're not going to come out there and guard that. Because if they do, they risk, of course, him going past him, which is a bigger concern, obviously. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. We'll see everybody live after the game, which it's going to be a late night on Tuesday night. But we'll see everybody there. Make sure you, of course, head out to our support page at finalfoursontheschedule.com/support to either support the show through Patreon or Substack, or, of course, visit any of our great sponsors, Brothers Adjuster Gutters, Nudge Printing, Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids, and FanDuel Sportsbook. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.